What's up? You got your boy Dyreck, AKA Native Shades, reminding you to like and subscribe. Because today we're going to be talking about the 5, count them, 5 most underrated samplers of all time. Now, we did a 5 greatest samplers, and you got your usual shoe-ins, and you had some really good honorable mentions, like the Korg Triton or the MPC 3000. But what about the 5 most underrated samplers of all time? The samplers that were dope, were great pieces of gear, but just never really got the credit they deserve. So let's talk about it. Sampler number 1 is the Roland MV 8000. I mean, just a fabulous sampler, just a fabulous piece of art. You had audio tracks in this. You had a mastering suite in this. You had VGA output in this. You had DAW-like editing on this. I mean, hook it up to a monitor and you could basically edit the machine as if you were using a DAW. They threw everything at this unit at this time. You gotta remember, it came a year after the MPC 4000 with the Z8 sampler, so they were really stepping their game up to compete with anybody. Being able to connect the mouse and the VGA output then led to the 8800, and to me, that led to the further development of software-hardware hybrids like Machine. So I think the MV 8000 is definitely one of the most underrated samplers of all time. Sampler number 2, the Korg Micro Sampler. This little keyboard goes unnoticed. I mean, you hardly hear anything about the Micro Sampler. You had 16-bit, 48 kilohertz, which you could sample down to 24, down more to 12, and down even more to 6. Just awesome. What makes this keyboard special is so many ways to sample. You could connect the sound source to its inputs, hit the keys you want your sample to be chopped on, and when you play your sound, the keyboard will chop it and put it on those keys automatically. You can press a key down in real time and chop up your samples. It has a real-time time stretch feature. Dope effects, the best editor librarian I've ever used. I remember reading somewhere that Timbaland and his engineer Sound Oracle would buy 3 to 4 of these micro samplers and use them together. Just so much fun. So much fun, they labeled it a baby ASR 10. So that definitely has to say something about how dope this little keyboard is. Sampler number 3, the Emu XT Ultra. This beast is a very underrated machine. You rarely hear anyone mention this thing. Around 1999, some of these features were revolutionary. It had 128 voice polyphony, a 32-bit processor, 8-out standard. It was real easy to use. Like back in the days, these rack samplers, they were like programming your VCR. It was confusing, But the Emu, the way they set everything up as far as samples, voices, and presets made everything simple. You could set the machine to trim and loop the sample as it's being recorded. It has a beat munging feature, which basically takes a loop, slices it up in different sections, and in each section independently you can change the speed, give it swing, take out a part of the section, add in a part of the section. You can pretty much completely rearrange your loop. So yeah, the Emu Emulator 4 XT Ultra Sampler was definitely a dope, underrated sampler. Next up on the top 5 underrated samplers of all time is the Boss SP 505. Now, you always hear them mention the SP404 or the SP303, but you rarely hear people talk about the 505. The Boss SP505 pretty much gave you everything you needed in a legit sampler for its price. It was all the basics you needed. You had sampling rates of 44.1 to 22.5 to 11.25 for that buttery lo-fi sound. You had an auto slice feature on the 505, real-time time stretch on the 505. The 505 gave you something the other SPs didn't. It gave you a song mode, so you can link your patterns all together and create your song. Around 2002, when this came out, this basically was a little workstation beast. The Boss SP505 definitely has to be one of the most underrated samplers of all time. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we've come all the way down to number 5, and that is the Zoom sample track ST224. Now, what makes this sampler so underrated was it didn't come from a company at the time as big as an AKAI or as a Roland or as a Korg, but still they came out with a real good sampler. You had sample rates of 32 kilohertz to 16 kilohertz, down to 8 kilohertz. It wasn't tedious to chop up your samples. It was actually fun, reminiscent of the SP1200, to a point they nicknamed this joint the poor man's SP1200. It had some of the most dopest and grittiest effects. Matter of fact, you can use the effects on the incoming signal from the sound source without even sampling a sound into the machine yet. It had a dope resampling feature, and it was praised by DJs and beat makers who used it. Yet you never really hear mention of it in magazine articles, or even when some folks are talking about samplers, period. So folks, the Zoom sample track has to be one of the greatest underrated samplers of all time. But what's your opinion? What would you say are the top underrated samplers of all time? Any honorable mentions? Let me know in the comment section. So this is your boy Dyreck, aka Native Shades, reminding you to like and subscribe, and I'm signing off.